creative process is a weird thing. People will often ask, how do you get creative? You know, how do you start that process? And you don't. You know, it's like what you do is you start the process of work. You know, in our business, yes, it's creative, and yes, it's very rewarding on that level, but it's work. You know, and it's deadline based. And quite frankly, and I tell them, one of the first things I tell people when they come in to the studio is like, look, right now you're wide-eyed and excited about this, but something you need to know right now is that you better love this business. You better love comic books. You better love illustrating, because there's going to be days, and it's going to be most of them, when you're going to be feeling like just sticking that pencil through your own neck. I broke in by going to comic book conventions, which is a great way to break into the comic book business. You're meeting professionals face to face, both creative, editorial, anyone you need to know in comics, you'll meet at a comic book convention. Go to school, if you can. You know, go ahead, go to school and learn your craft. That's what school does for you. You know, school is just providing information to you faster than you're going to get it on your own. And in some cases, you may never get that information. You know, it's like there's things that dawn on me today that, well, maybe if I had gone to school and learned that, I would have known it 20 years ago. Go ahead. You know, it's not required for the comic book business. It may not help you to tell a dynamic story, per se, but it will help you in the fundamentals of how to draw the human figure. How to draw the human figure sitting in a chair. You know, you maybe aren't going to get that from looking at other comic book illustrators, except for a certain few, but you can get that at school, at art school. Having a shelf full of useful books to help you develop as an artist. I think the first one that people throw out there is Gray's Anatomy, which I've written or put together sometime probably in the 30s. It's a staple for artists. And it shows the good fundamental tools of structure of the human body. That's a good start just to have, because structure will always come into play. No matter how good you get at certain aspects of comics, if you don't have your structures down on how to draw the human body, regardless of what your style is. Some people are more cartoony than others, some are more realistic than others, some more stylized. Regardless, you have to have the basic knowledge and structure of the human form. As far as what we're looking for in submissions, and again, aside from storytelling, because storytelling is very, very crucial, obviously, to submissions, but we're looking, number one, for young talent, because you want to break bad habits early. You know, if someone, and I see this all the time at conventions, someone who has had a career in something else for years and years, or adults, you know, 30 and over, whatever, have always had this itch to be in comic books, and have been drawing at home for years and years. Unfortunately, you develop bad habits that the adage of you can't teach an old dog new tricks sometimes is very, very true. You just cannot break those habits. So what we like to do is we like to find kids that have a love for comics, because you absolutely need that love for comics and illustration, and see the raw talent. If you really want to learn how to draw, here's who you look at. You know, you look at guys like Manure, you look at guys like John Buscema from years ago. You look at illustrators like Frank Frazetta, if you want to learn how to draw a dynamic human form. Artists like that are invaluable tools for young guys coming up, because those are guys that have already figured it out. You know, they've figured out the questions that you have early on in your career. You know, they have already figured out the bad habits and gotten rid of them. This mirror is actually one of the tools of the trade that surprisingly not a lot of people use, and they should. And that's one of the first things that the guys notice when they first come in, because there's mirrors on people's tables. And sometimes it takes a while before people get it, but eventually there's going to be a mirror there, because you can't think of the gesture in your head. Sometimes you have to go, ooh, you know, and freeze that gesture. Well, sometimes you can't see it. There's a mirror. Also, its primary function is drawing hands. Because drawing hands is very, very important. Just like in theater, a lot of your acting is with your hands. And in comics, a lot of your emoting, a lot of your acting is with the subtle gestures in your hands. And hands structurally are very difficult for artists took me years to learn how to draw hands. And one of the tricks I learned was that mirror. Fog's a great tool in comics, by the way. If you have a problem connecting the building to the horizon line, ooh, it's foggy this morning. Yeah, just erase that in there. It's like, oh, I use that fog. And you know what? It just so happens to look cool. You know, Mike Mignola actually kind of pioneered that in contemporary comics. Nobody can fog out the bottom half of a person better than Mike Mignola. You know, I was like, oh, that's great. And you're like, wait a minute, he didn't really finish that figure. You know, but it's like one of the things that I tell the guys when they're, you know, trying to figure out storytelling and what have you. It's like, look, it's an illusion. Your storytelling is an illusion. You know, it's just like the sprockets, or rather the frames of movie film. You know, there's a gap in between there, in between those two shots of movie film, those two frames that your brain fills in. You know, so part of your job as a storyteller is to give the illusion sometimes that something is there that it's not. Connected to that is, you know, you have to learn how to draw certain things that people function with on a regular basis. You know, your phone better look like a phone. Because even if people can't draw the phone, they know when one doesn't look like a phone. You know, if someone can't draw a face, they know when that face is tweaked, if you've drawn it incorrectly. You know, they don't know why, but they know that it is. The most important thing, the first important thing that I do when I first read a script is I try to put myself in that world of the script. And I try to put myself in there. And usually it works out that it conveys itself on the page because I've immersed myself in that world, whatever it is. And my genre is fairly specific in that it's action adventure. And it's, for the most part, superheroes dealing with action adventure. So it's easy for me to put myself in that world. Sometimes it takes place in the future, sometimes it takes place today, but I can put myself in that world. But you need to get a feel for what the story is and what the characters are. And then you start doing your design work and your sketching and you start laying out the story in your mind. What you have to instill in people is that, look, you're not going to be brilliant every day. It's just not going to happen. As I said before, you're really going to be on creatively 10% of your time. 10% of the time that you're sitting at your drawing table, everything's going to be working for you. And you're going to be just running on autopilot. It's going to be incredible. But the other 90% of the time, you got to get the job done. So that means moving on. An indelicate term that we use is you got to kill your children. You know, it's like these things can't be so precious to you that you're not ready to move on and keep going. Now, if you have time, you can go back and fix it. One of the, I believe, causes of writer's block and artist's block is your brain dwells on a negative aspect of something you've done. Or it dwells, and it's the same, it's the other side of the same coin, it dwells on a success that you've had, and can you measure up to that? You know, and I think your brain plays little tricks on you, that little demon on one of your shoulders going, you can never live up to what you did before. Today you suck. You know, like you have no idea how to access that brilliance you had 3 days ago. You know, because today you can't draw worth anything. You know, you can't be thinking that way. And what happens when you develop the ability to just move on is that before you know it, that little devil, he's been kicked off your shoulder because you're not dwelling on it anymore. You're not dwelling on worrying about impressing anyone with your writing skills or your drawing skills. You know, one thing we noticed was that, you know what, if I can learn how to use a computer, anybody can learn how to use a computer. What we were looking for were painters. So our idea was like, look, we can find someone who knows how to paint and teach them to use the new tool, the computer. But it's very tough to find someone who knows how to use a computer and teach them how to paint. Years ago, Image Comics pretty much pioneered the mainstream use of computers for coloring and effects and production. Before that, it was all kind of done old school that had been done for 30, 40, 50 years. You know, the old school printing process when you had the limited color palette. Now we have an unlimited color palette with the computers and the printing that we use. So I would, quite frankly, I don't think I've ever seen in the past 8 years a color sample done by hand.
It's just one of the things I like to do when I draw, because for all of you that want to get into comic books, you always have to keep in mind, excuse me, that we live in a two-dimensional medium that is static. right? It's not like a movie. It's not even like a novel where you use your imagination, or a movie where the images are moving. It's static. So our job as illustrators is to give the illusion of motion, right? So whenever you can, you kind of do something dramatic, like I'm going to just give him some hair that's moving. And you can kind of see how he's coming together a little bit here. Can you guys see okay? A little bit? And at this point, I'm kind of just getting a feeling of who he is. And like I was telling you, I'm going to make him the more savage Wolverine. And I'm going to have him coming forward, because that's dynamic. And again, because it's a two-dimensional medium, you kind of want to, as often as you can, give the illusion of 3D. That's why when you're drawing a panel with a background, you want to have the foreground, midground, background clearly defined, so that the reader's brain gets fooled. It's like, ooh, there's a lot more going on than there really is. That's an important aspect for all of you people that, I'm sorry that you want to get into the business, but, that's up to you. But that's something to keep in mind, is that it is a static medium, and it's your job to make it less so.
So when you're doing this kind of work, and as you're rendering, and what is your trick when because you've done a lot, so you have a lot of referencing to follow. And I'm sure you've done your share of references in the day. But for folks who are just getting started, and you're like, how do I draw a hand? What do I do with these feet?
Use yours. Get a mirror, put it on your drawing table. Use yourself as much as possible. If you have a mirror, you can use your own hands. Use that. Don't be afraid. I use reference when I need to, especially if it's a specific building, or if it's someone sitting in a chair. I just can't get it. I just can't get it to feel right. I'll find some reference. Don't be a slave to reference, okay? Look at it, put it away. That's one of the things that's a pet peeve of mine in a lot of art that I see these days, is that I've seen that pose. I've seen it, that other guy drew that same pose, sitting in that chair, and I know where you got it. It's like, just look at it, get the feeling of what part of it you weren't getting right, get the gesture. It's all about the gesture. You notice, like, I'm here and I'm not putting in any details yet, because I want to make sure the gesture is smooth and loose and free. And sometimes if you're a slave to the reference, it's going to be kind of stiff, and everyone's going to know that looks like it came from a photograph. And again, where does that go back to? It goes back to, it's your job as an artist to make the illusion of movement. And nothing can stiffen up your work more than just drawing something that already exists as a photograph. You want to have that life. You want to throw those lines. You want to have that energy. And if you're a slave to reference, you're going to lose that energy. Yeah, it's like, I'm an old school guy because I'm old. It's like, yes, I started on stone tablets. It's like, but you know what? Yeah, I learned on paper and pencil because it's all we had. Computers hadn't even been created yet, let alone for the home. But there's one thing that, first of all, I get it. If you're digital, I get it. I understand why that's an important tool. This is a time-sensitive business we're in, especially if you do concept work. I can't see you doing original stuff, because you're just wasting everyone's time. Do it digitally. But for me, I love the tactile feel of the paper. I love the fact that I can tell what the temperature is or what the humidity is in my office based on how my pencil or pen is going across the paper. I just love that. Plus, and we touched on this before, and again, this is no. But you lose the preciousness of the piece, because when I'm finished with this is the only one, all right? And that's it, and you can hold it. If you're good people and you bid some money on it for that good cause, you get to put this on your wall, and it's the only one that will ever exist forever, right? So you have that little precious piece of art, good or bad, and again, I could still screw this up badly. It's still the only one.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, that's important to me.
Yeah.
It feels like something. So, and again, I get the tool. I'm not even going to say that I just don't know how to work a computer. But at this point, you just want to keep things fluid and loose. Like here, obviously I have some extra lines, but his crotch isn't going to be that low. I'll fix that. And again, in real life, does someone's leg, does that connection between the knee and the calf look like that? Not necessarily, but what does it do? It provides energy. It's not exact, it's not precise, it's not photographic, but there's energy, right? So if you look at some of the best manga work, none of that stuff is accurate, but there's a lot of energy to it. And that's what's important. You want that energy, you want it to kind of leap off the page. Yeah, even someone drinking a cup of coffee can have some energy to it. It doesn't mean you have to do this, but it has to have something coming from the drawing that's not hyper photo referenced, that's you just kind of go past it. Like, I recognize that because I see that every day. You want that reader to feel something almost every single panel without interfering with the storytelling, because that's the flow. But you want them to feel something.
Do you have tricks for building energy in subtle ways that you can bestow upon this audience who is now gathered around you drawing?
Well, John Buscema, I don't know about you guys, but John Buscema to me is like, Jack Kirby and John Buscema are the gods of comics. If you're an artist, I would say if you're going to look at a comic book artist, look at John Buscema. Maybe he's a little bit boring for some people, but no one is better at the fundamentals of figure drawing than John Buscema. So look at his stuff. And he had one thing that he said to people that really kind of resonated, right? It's specific to comic work. When he said, draw someone running, don't think of a person who's running. Think of a hockey player at full speed skating. All right, now visualize that in your mind and go, yeah, that makes sense. That's where your energy is. It's not just some reference of a guy jogging, from like clip art. I'm jogging. This is the energy of an ice skater going full speed ahead. It's exaggerated, but it's the movement of running. All right, so take that one to the bank, because that's just really good, solid advice from John Buscema, a master at the craft.
I'm going to do a sketch of the darkness. I have the basic figure drawing in here, already done my exercises, I'm all loose. And at this stage, I'm happy with what's there. And I'm going to pencil this in here, and you'll start to see stuff coming through. You can already see there's his face, the darkness. What you want to do when you're drawing is you want to think shapes when you're drawing loose, when you're doing the initial layouts, rather than details. You draw big to small. Superhero proportions. All these guys are in shape for some reason, I don't know. None of this is based on how I look. And from there, I can start thinking more about what's going to be happening on in details. And you can kind of see that I'm keeping things loose and fast. When you're drawing, it's always a good idea in the formative stage, draw fast. Don't spend too much time, don't belabor over certain areas. Draw fast to keep things loose. You can worry about your details later. You do little energy things. And again, right now, maybe you can't quite see what's happening here, but I can pretty much see what I'm going to do. I'm an artist who's very organic in his thinking. I have an aversion to rulers. I don't really like using them. Maybe it's because I'm horrible at math or what have you, but numbers kind of scare me like spiders. So I'm very organic. I'm going to have these squiggly supernatural snake shapes go up and off the composition, and that's to keep the balance. But you can kind of see everything is there. It's pretty much an illustration, incomplete, but everything that you need is there. I'm going to indicate that the light's going to be coming from here, so I'm casting a shadow on Jackie's neck. As I move forward now, I'm going to start making some choices about black areas and white areas, positive and negative space. No promises that it's going to look any good, but I'm going to give it my best shot. Now when I ink, I use markers. A lot of people use quill pens. Like Scott Williams is the master of the quill. I could never master the quill. For me, it's like it just became a mess. So markers became my friend. But I'm doing the hair right now. And again, the clumps of where the hair falls, trying to keep the shape of the hair interesting. Sometimes when you're doing comics, accuracy is not quite as important as aesthetics. This image doesn't move. It's not animated, it's not CGI, it's not on the silver screen or on your TV. There's nothing moving here. And yet you're gonna get the illusion that these snakes and tendrils are writhing and moving. And I always tell people that are trying to get into the business or just starting, it's not just about drawing pretty pictures. A lot of people can draw pretty pictures, but what you are as a comic book illustrator is you're a storyteller. Hands are something that you really do need to know how to draw. Learn how to draw. Pick your targets. Learn how to draw hands because you're going to need that skill. His hands are very, very expressive and they can actually help you with your character's acting. Okay. I'm going to take this brush pen, using black shapes here, the positive shapes against the negative helps things kind of stand out. I'm going to keep doing that as I move forward to finish off the piece. You know, one of the oldest tricks in comics is the thicker the line, the more it's going to come forward. Don't be afraid to go, you know what, I'm thinking pen rather than brush right now. Because if you stick to your guns too much and go, you know what, I'm a pen guy or I'm a brush guy, you could be really missing out on some cool stuff happening for you. All right, so now I'm going to go back in there and chunk in the black areas on Jackie's face. I prefer cross-hatching and line work as opposed to, let's say, gray markers. Only because, again, it's back to that energy thing. There's something about line work as opposed to just going in there with gray markers. You know, even though what I'm doing right now aren't serpents, it's just black, or rather it's just a dark background, I'm going to kind of go with the movements that the serpents are doing. You know, and it's, again, it's like, it's the energy thing. And as I go along, you'll see that this really is just background element to help pop everything out. So, you know, when you do things like these lines, it's not because I want the reader to look at every single line I'm drawing, just the opposite. You know, I'm using these lines to give an impression. You know, like impressionistic painters, you know, which I was a big fan of. We go in there with a little bit of whiteout, and again, to kind of pick out some shapes. Now, one last thing. I'm Marc Silvestri. I hope you enjoyed this sketching session, and this is The Darkness.